Is everyone ready to get started? Type yes or raise your hand if you are, and we'll get going. Oh, looks like Luke is ready, Kieran is ready, Ted is ready, Mark is ready, Paul is ready, David, Ed, Ray, Rudy, Sean, Keith, and Denise are all ready to go, and so are Amy, Becky, Danny, and Jill. Yes. I just love having a big, like if we were in person, this would be a good sized classroom of people. So I'm excited that we're all here. Nathan also is excited. Uh, Amy loves this. Well, I'm glad to help Amy. Okay, so this is ProPresenter 7. If you haven't seen it before, let me just go through a couple of things that are different about Pro 7 over Pro 6, 5, 4, 3. I never actually used 2 or 1. I came in at Pro 3. But I know I have been using since Pro 3 days. So this is the UI. You'll notice that it is dark. Now, part of that is a design trend, but it's also the case that it's helpful for those of us that are doing things live. If you're in a room that is supposed to be dark, like you're trying to set a dramatic mood and you've got a big old white bright monitor lighting up your face, that could cause problems, might cause people to notice you when you don't necessarily want to be noticed. So that's the practical reason that it's dark. And quite frankly, it looks like a 2020 user interface now as opposed to Pro 6, which was fine, but headed towards getting dated. So the first thing you'll probably notice, at least the first thing I noticed, is this preview monitor right over here is here instead of over here, which is where it was in Pro 6, 5, 4, and 3. So why they do that? Well, if you look at it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Here is where you get stuff. So you've got your libraries, you've got your playlists. You can choose between where media is stored here. That's where you get it. And then you're interacting with it normally through the course of a service or a show, depending on if you're in a church or not. You're interacting with it here, and you may or may not show backgrounds. Here's a background. Oops, sorry, I did that before. This is a background. So now I can put text on top of it. So that is pretty cool. And over here is where you see the preview, the transport controls, and audio if you do want to do audio. So I've got a couple of audio files here. I don't always use the audio. Here are some different playlists. So I created a new playlist with nothing in it, and then I can collapse that down so that I don't accidentally play music during one of these things or during whatever presentation that you're doing. So that is kind of the basic overview, but let me dive into some of these controls a little bit more. First off, you'll notice that the clear buttons, which used to be up here, are actually over here. So we've got clear all, but we also have these other buttons. And this makes a lot of sense in that ProPresenter is built on a layer metaphor. So one layer builds on top of the other, on top of the other. Now, most people use the slides layer and the background layer primarily, but it's helpful to know that the background or media layer, because it can also play foreground videos, is below the slides layer. Now above that, we've got the announcements layer. I'll talk about that in a second. Then we've got the props layer, the messages layer, and the ability to clear audio. At any time, I can always still use the clear all button here to clear everything, or based on what's showing, it will highlight. So I don't have the announcement loop running right now, or that would be lit up. In fact, all I have are these two layers. So if I wanted to get rid of my background, I can just click that and clear media. Now you'll notice that when I did that, that stopped playing down here because the background, because I can start that again, this is showing how long I have left on the background, what the name of the background is. I could go back 15 seconds. I could go forward 15 seconds. I could go 30 seconds from the end if I wanted to. This piece of media isn't 30 seconds, so that wouldn't really work. I could even pause it if I wanted to. If I had an announcement loop going, I could click here and we could see the transport controls for the announcements layer. And this is the transport controls for the audio layer. So I have control there. I also have control here. By clicking this drop down menu, I can choose which display I want to show. So I can show screen 5, or I can show the NDI with alpha is a layer that I was just showing you, or I can show you the stage screens, formerly called stage displays. So let's say I had one that was above the tech booth. I could call it above the tech booth. One on the front row, stage display 1, just, maybe I only have one, or maybe that's the first one we had. And dual vertical is another layout that I've been playing with, where since in ProPresenter 7 you can have so many displays, you can actually create a stage display that has previews of all the displays. So that's another nifty little feature they've included there. That is nearly everything over here, but oh, I should say that with audio, they added a crossfade, which is a new feature. It used to be when you go from one thing to the other, or you'd stop it, it would just cut off. So they fixed that right there as well. So up here, it used to be that there was a little display out icon here, and when it was green, that meant the display out was working, and when it was red, that meant it wasn't working. And you could click on it and it would go back and forth, but there was no indication of the stage display. Well, now they've fixed that, so I can turn that off or turn it back on. Same with the stage, all on or all off. So that's where you do that. Going back over here, we have a couple of nifty little features here. Let me go to this. You'll see that I have these two slideshows here. Let that populate here. This is the latest and greatest ProPresenter 7, ProPresenter 7.01. They just released this update, so I'm really hoping that there isn't a bug that I find tonight. It has happened before, but hoping that I don't, because this came out today. So I have these two loops here, which are identical. So let me put this one here, and we'll start it. There. So you'll notice that I've got this green target up here. This is where I decide if this particular piece of the presentation is part of the presentation. That's the default. It defaults to presentation or announcements. If I select announcements, as I have right here, then that lights up green, and it basically behaves like its own sub copy of ProPresenter in it. And if I go back here to this one, you'll notice that these are two identical loops, but this is no longer green. And if I click on one of these, So Becky is asking a very good question. Can you send to announcements and presentation? So the answer is yes. And let me table that for just a second, because I first want to show you how you add a second display. And then I'll show you how you say what goes where, etc. So there we go. Starting to do some stuff now. Okay, so if we go to screens and configure screens, yep, and Luke, I'll tell you what the announcement layer does. And okay, let me tell you what the idea behind it is, and then I'll tell you what it does. So the announcement layer, the idea behind it was that you might have a bunch of televisions in your lobby. And depending on the size of your church, maybe a bunch is 2, or maybe it is 20, just depending on the size of your church. And you want to send a loop of announcement slides constantly to that while you're practicing, and you're going through the slides to make sure everything's going with the worship team. You want, on the lobby slides, you want them to keep going without showing what's actually going on in the sanctuary. So that's the thought behind it, but it can be anything that you want it to be. So it's like having ProPresenter able to send 2 totally different loops, or maybe you want to use it like Andy Stanley does at his church. They've got the big teaching TV. Maybe your pastor wants to do that, but you don't want those points to go up automatically on the screens in the room. You could do that as well. So you have a little bit of flexibility there. And it's a layer, so it lives on top of the slides layer. So at any time you could remove it, clear it out, and then what's underneath it would shine through. So it's got a lot of power, and it does require 2 outputs, but there are multiple ways to get multiple outputs. So here we're in the screens configuration, and you'll notice that I have 2 outputs right here, but I don't have to only have 2. You'll notice one of these is NDI. That is a network digital interface, is what NDI stands for. And with that, I can send low latency video over the network in the church to another device that can see and decode it somewhere else. Now that could be just a hardware dongle, it could be a computer, it could be certain video switchers, etc. So you've got the ability to, anywhere that there is a network, hardwired is better, but you can theoretically send it over Wi-Fi. Then you can send the output of ProPresenter there. This screen is just a regular screen that I have connected, and adding in a new screen is just as easy as, let's say I wanted to do this screen. I can just click on it and it shows up. And that is that screen right over there, right there. So it just showed up when I clicked it. And so now I've got 3 outputs, and getting rid of it is just as easy as right-clicking and clicking on delete. And I can also click on it slowly and rename this lobby if I wanted to, or call it whatever I wanted it to be called. So really the limits of how many you can do is how many your computer will do. I'm part of the ProPresenter beta group, and Brad Zimmerman today, as part of it, you know, the guy that does the official ProPresenter videos, he was showing that he had 8 or 9 displays hooked up to his iMac. So that was pretty cool. Um, and there was a lot of lag with that, but you could imagine in some situations maybe that doesn't matter as much. Maybe it's something where you're just showing a bunch of TVs and you have a dedicated um, ProPresenter machine that is just putting up slides there or something, where it doesn't matter if you have lag on those because you're not actually interacting with them. So you've got a lot of power there. For the stage, you recall that I showed you several of these. In ProPresenter 6, you were limited to one hardwired stage display. In ProPresenter 7, again, as many as your computer wants, then you can use. And unlike ProPresenter 6, all of these can be different resolutions. So this dual vertical one, I was envisioning that I would have a 16:9 screen right here and another one right here. So I actually created a kind of odd resolution based on that fact, because this is not a real output. This is another thing that I can do is a placeholder. So if you've got a machine that you just need to make your presentations on, you can make placeholder screens of the resolution that you'll be using when you're at church. So let's say you're at home and you're on your computer and your church has a video wall. Just throwing that out, I know not everyone does. In fact, not most churches do, but let's say you do. And it is an odd resolution. Well, your TV at home is the closest you come to something like that, and it's not even close. Well, here in ProPresenter 7, we can add a placeholder screen that is the custom size you need it to be. NDI, I told you about, that's the ability to send something over the network. This was created by NewTek, the people that make the TriCaster switcher system. Siphon, this is one of the few things that isn't in the Windows version of ProPresenter, and that's because this is a Mac little open source project that Renewed Vision added in ProPresenter 6. And Siphon basically enables you to send the output of ProPresenter to other software that is Siphon aware, and vice versa. So a live feed can come in via Siphon, but only on the same computer. So it's not as flexible as NDI that can send it on the same network. Then I've got the dual previews that I was working on before. Those are both placeholders. So, and I can choose, if I were to add this one, it would be this screen. So I'm not going to do this. This was the one that I added a minute ago. This is the one on the right hand side. So that's more similar to ProPresenter 6, but not a lot. So you should also know that you can use a Matrox dual head to go or triple head to go if you want, where the computer thinks it's one wide screen, and then the hardware, the Matrox dual head to go or triple head to go or quad head to go or the DataPath X4, any of those basically switch they cut up this extra wide display that the computer thinks that you're plugged into to make it multiple displays. You can do that, or I could take multiple discrete displays and treat them the same way. Let me click back on this, and I want to show you some of the different choices I have. I have single here. That one makes sense. Mirror means I can have multiple that have the exact same thing. Doesn't have to be 2. It could be 3. It could be 4. It could be 5. However many I need that are mirrored, these are, they would all be displays on connected to the computer, which might have some processing power issues if you got too many. Normally, I recommend that people use what most people call as a splitter. Technically, it's a distribution amplifier, or DA, but you can mirror it in ProPresenter 7 now. You could have them grouped together. So I have two here that are grouped together, making like a virtual dual head to go, but it doesn't have to be one row with two columns. It could be two rows with two columns. It could be three rows with two columns, or three rows with three columns. Really, or as in this case, three rows, one column. It's really up to your imagination and how much your computer can support, because Pro 7 can deal with all of that. Oh, I didn't do the last one, edge blend. So if you have two identical projectors, this is kind of hard to do, but let's say you want an extra wide screen and you don't have money for an LED wall. So you can take two identical projectors with two identical aged lamps and you can put them next to each other. But in order for that center line to be seamless, you actually need to get them overlapping just a little bit and have, there are hardware boxes that do it, but ProPresenter does it as well. It basically fades off the edge of one and fades off the edge of the other so that they make a seamless transition between the two. So that's what edge blending does. So those are all those different choices. For the hardware, we've got, I showed you the output. Over here, output target full, that means you want it on the full screen. But there are other options. You could do 2x1, where you have two different pieces, and this is where you say, okay, this one is on the left, and then you add another one and say this one is on the right. But you could also do a 3x1, where this one's on the left, this one's in the center, this one's on the right. So you've got a few different options there. There's also a custom option where you can kind of change the height and width and where it starts and ends. You can change the color of any of these. So if you have, let's say you've got a projector that's just a little green, you could enable that and turn down the green if you wanted to. I mean, disable it though. Corner pinning is like keystone correction. I don't know why they call it corner pinning, but that's what they call it in ProPresenter, and that's built in, and you can just enable that, and then you can change the way that the projector is projecting. This wouldn't be good for an LED wall per se, but you could imagine that you're shooting from very high, shooting down, and the top of the light is much closer to the screen than the bottom. So it forms like this kind of pattern. Well, you can correct for that in the corner pin, or vice versa. If you're shooting down low, then it would be inversed, where anything closer is going to be smaller and anything farther away is going to be wider. So you can correct that here. A lot of projectors do that, but not all do. So we've got that. So that's how you add multiple displays. Here we have the ability to identify the screens. So when I click on that, it would put up on what screen that you have here, what it's called. So in case you swap some cables or something, you could go, oh, that's why it's not doing what I wanted it to do. I'm sending the wrong thing. So here too, you can watch over here. You'll notice that audience, when I click on that, it goes red. When I click on it again, it goes green. Same for stage. Now it's green, now it's red. And so it's back to the way that it was. Let me go back to hardware and go back to full, just so that it is the way that I remember it being. And now, since we've got multiple screens, we want to know what we're sending in to what screen. So we have this new feature called looks. So if I click on edit looks, we'll give this just a second to pop up. Hopefully that software is not still downloading. Okay, so with looks, I can say, hey, send props and messages to the lobby screen, but don't send the announcements layer. Or do. It's really just a checkbox. And so if, let's say at your church, you never send anything other than the announcements loop to the lobby TVs. During church, you want to encourage people to come into the sanctuary, so you never put up the pastor's sermon notes, you never put up worship lyrics, anything like that. You could leave it like this, where the lobby has announcements there, and that's it. And we wouldn't want maybe this NDI output. We never want the lobby announcements loop to go to it, so we can uncheck that. Here and here, we have the ability to add a mask or edit masks if you were doing environmental projection. That's typically the situation that you are using, or if you were doing an odd shaped screen. So you might imagine for a dramatic presentation, you had a screen that looked like it was mountain shaped. Well, you would mask out everything other than the mountains, and maybe depending on the time of the day, the mountain color changes. Maybe there's snow sometimes, maybe there's a thunderstorm over the mountains, and so you would mask out everything that wasn't the mountains. But environmental projection is typically the way that that's used. This layer right here, it's saying, do I use the default theme, formerly called templates, or do I use a different one? So here are all my themes, and so I could say that the lobby TV has a different theme than the other output, or the other two outputs, or each output has a different theme. There's the default theme, which has this Ghostbusters kind of symbol in it, the nun, and then each other screen has a different theme. So maybe you want a lower third for your live stream. You could do that while having a full screen for the side screens in the sanctuary, or maybe a full screen for the pastor's teaching TV. USB output for stage display? Yes, you can do a USB output for stage display. In fact, my monitor over there is a USB output, the one that I pointed to right over there. So that works fine. Yes, you can import PowerPoint. I haven't gotten to testing that yet with Pro 7, but I believe, I know that they did some work on the PowerPoint import. I believe that it might be the case that you can download a PowerPoint viewer and do PowerPoint import. I just have to figure out, what any limitations are about that, since we're still, this was a week and one day that this has been out. I've been playing with it a little bit longer because I was part of the beta group, but I don't have all those answers yet, but they're coming. So, okay, back here in Pro 7, one thing you should know is that this is now modal. So it used to be in Pro 6 that if you went into the editor, it basically brought up a pop-up window, and then you would X out of the pop-up window. Now it changes mode. So we've got show, edit is the editor. So you'll notice that that looks different. Reflow editor, Bible, we'll talk about Bible here in just a second, and go from there. So here in editor, we have basically the ability to preview what it looks like, or I can click show if I was doing something and it needed to go up right then, and it would show up. This slide notes tab can make the slide notes go away if you never use that, but instead of it being like a little box over here, it's now a decent sized thing that you can type into. Just type something. Let's see here. Oh, so I started to write the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, and that was, there we go. So I could put slide notes there if I wanted to. Going back here, let's hide the slide notes. If I click here on the slide itself, you'll notice that I only have 3 buttons at the top, one for the shape, one for text, and one for build. Build used to be called element transitions, so it would show individual pieces animating in as opposed to the entire slide or nothing. So that's a pretty cool feature. You can also animate it by bullet or underline, change the transition that you have here, and there are new transitions in ProPresenter. I'm a bit of a minimalist, so I tend to do mostly cuts, the occasional cross dissolve. But if you wanted to do a color burn, I showed that on a previous webinar, so it's actually one that I've used, a zoom in transition, a wipe. You can do all those, and the transitions have individual things that you can change. So you can change, let's see, from the top right as opposed to from the top. So I'm going to remove that to go back to the way that it was. Over here we have the slide objects. So in this I have text, you'll see right here. This was from a worship conference that I did last weekend. And then we have the image itself, and I rearranged some stuff, so I put a black box underneath it. So I can drag these in any order, and you'll actually see. Oh, that's because the text was there. So the black box is right here. If I hide that with the little eye, you'll see that it goes away and comes back. So I've got some flexibility there. Also, I can do the lock. If I say, okay, that's where it is, I don't want to move it accidentally, and I can lock it in place. If I want to add more things to the slide, I can do it up here with this plus button. This is a plus, not an X. This doesn't get you out of the editor like it used to in the past. So that's where I add text, shape, set a polygon. And notice that I can change the number of sides. So that could be like a diamond shape. I can make it more diamondy, etc. And I can delete that. I think I'm just gonna do that. There we go. If you change the slide notes background color, does it change on the stage display as well? You know, I don't know. I don't think it does, because you do have control over that. Maybe if we've got enough time, we'll look at that here in a minute. because you've got a lot more control in the stage layout than you did before. You can change fonts, you can change colors, you can change arrangement, of course. This is ProPresenter after all. So you can change all of that. You can have, instead of just a slide preview, you can do a preview of what any output has. So you could have a stage display that has various previews. Maybe that stage display is only shown in the preview on your Mac or your Windows machine. Got to get used to that, because that's another great feature of Pro 7, that they rewrote Pro 7 from the ground up. So the Windows and the Mac version are virtually identical. They're not 100%, like Siphon is one of those ones, but they're all like little bitty things that I haven't heard a lot of complaints about yet, because they're so rarely used. And it's probably less than 5 little things. It's not like, oh, the MIDI module is missing completely like it was in Pro 6. Oh, it's 32-bit versus 64. No, they're both 64 now. So let's, while I'm thinking about it, can you set the in and out points of videos? Yes, you can. So actually, let me answer that here in a second after I talk about Bibles, because Bibles with Pro 7, you can add as many different versions of the Bible on a single slide as either you want to, because after 2 it gets a little busy on a standard 16:9 slide, but you can imagine if you've got a really wide screen, maybe you could put 2 on one side, 2 on the other. So here I've added 4. I only have 4 translations of the Bible in this here. These were all the free ones, because this isn't a machine I present on. This is a machine I train you with. So what you're doing here is you're saying, okay, the theme that I have, where do I want this? What text box does this go into? So it shows you where they are. So I can put it in the reference here if I wanted to, and I could put this one with the verse, and I could get rid of them if I wanted to. And let's look up one. Let's go for my funny life verse, Acts 26, 24, and search. And so you see, let's make that a little bit bigger. Actually, let's do like that. And let's see, oh, that's the, should have done the, yeah, let's actually swap that. Should have done the basic English bigger. So you can see I could have created a theme where I have more text boxes, but in this case I just had 2 on the theme that I'd selected. So that's something pretty cool. I can also change the transition right here, and I can save it as a presentation itself, copied to the selected presentation, so copy it to here, or save it to the playlist as its own thing. So I really have some different choices here, and they're a little bit more obvious than the gear icon that used to be down here. I missed that for like the first 6 months that ProPresenter 6 was there. I'm like, well, this isn't all that helpful. Oh, because it's right here. So real quick, the keyboard shortcut for this is Control S for show, Control E for edit, Control R for reflow, which I don't think we're going to have any time to go into reflow. Control B for Bible, and the same keyboard shortcut toggles back to show. So I could go Control B, and that takes me back to show. So Control B takes me to Bible and then takes me out of Bible. Control S always takes me to show, I believe. So that's just a little about the beginnings of Pro 7. There's so much there, and we've been going for almost an hour. I do want to answer your questions, but before I do, real quick, I'm going to tell you about a few things that I have that might help you, because as you can tell, there's so much there. Well, I've already started a new course, the ProPresenter 7 creation course, and let me show you a little bit about what's that. So what we were dealing with a few minutes ago was the tour of the UI. I show you how to make your first presentation, different ways of working with text, working with video, slide loops and calendar. The very next one is actually going to answer your question, Danny, but I'm going to answer it here in just a few minutes. And then I also have a live course where basically for people that are a member of my Church Tech U community, I go through these one at a time. So we started earlier this week with basically the same thing that you just were a part of. And then I'm going to expand from there next week. And then we're just going to keep going until I cover every last feature in ProPresenter. If they launch a new one, I'm going to update with the new stuff. And they can ask their questions live, just like you can ask your questions live. That also includes a private Facebook community where it's a lot fewer people, so we can actually interact a little bit better. The ProPresenter users group, I love it, but we're actually getting a little ungainly, and that's cool. We get a lot of questions and a lot of answers really fast. So that's cool, but if you want more one-on-one attention, this is a great place to do that. And I wanted to tell you, for some reason, let me try reloading this again. This is giving me all sorts of troubles here. I wonder if my Chrome is having issues, but this is the sales page. And if you scroll down, not only does it show you all the courses that are included, including Pro 5 courses. So if you've got a ministry that's still on Pro 5, they can feel that. So we've got that starts out for just $1 for the first month and only $34.97 for your entire church campus. So every person, volunteer or staff that wants to learn about ProPresenter or other church tech stuff, I've got live streaming stuff, stuff about starting a YouTube channel, etc. So I'll paste that link into the chat if anyone's interested, and we'll go from there. So back to your questions as soon as I paste this in. I don't know why it won't let me do the keyboard shortcut for paste, but it won't. So I had to right click. Okay, so let's go back to some of these questions. I think I got all of them up to Bernice's, which is better, Mac or PC? Right now, I'm happy to say it's your personal preference. I'm a Mac guy. I'll probably always be a Mac guy. And so I can continue to use Pro 7 on Mac. If you know Cody in the community, he is a Windows guy, even though he works for Renewed Vision, and he loves how well Pro 7 works on his Windows machine. So it's really up to you. I dropped my mic. I hope it's still, yep, looks like it's still working. So It's really up to you. If you have a preference one over the other for what you feel like are usability features, then that's cool. And if not, then um, just go with whichever one everyone wants to use, or which one costs the least money, or which one has the least troubles in your experience, whatever. So, can you import PowerPoint? The answer is yes. Um, it used to require certain versions of PowerPoint. I believe now you can also choose a PowerPoint viewer, but I haven't tested it out, so I don't know if it's the same as it was in Pro 6, which I tested on both Windows and Mac. The Windows one had a slight edge because it would do animations, but they weren't a one-to-one correlation, so it wouldn't always do them well. So uh, that's that. Who sees notes? You can put a notes box on the stage display, Becky, and then as a result, people can see them from, stage screen. Sorry, it used to be called stage display. People who are up in front of everyone could see the notes while they're doing the announcements. Hey, don't forget to talk about the fundraiser that the teens are having. That could be a note, and that could help the person remember to do that. So that's how we use notes. You can also send messages on the stage display or stage screen. So can you set the in and out points for video? Yes. If you right click on there on a video, go to Inspector. Hey, look, there's a place where I can mark there, hit in, put it there, do out. I could type those numbers in as well if actually 14 seconds would work better. I could do that, mark that as out. Oops. Out, etc. So I can absolutely do that. I'm going to reset those so that it doesn't confuse me, because that would cause a jump cut if I did that as is. I also have the ability here in properties to change the scaling ability. I can flip horizontally, vertically, crop it if I want to. Let me click that, or I can rotate it. And now I can rotate it 90 degrees, which is great for when someone gives you a video that doesn't import right. So you aren't stuck with 180 degrees or 0. You can rotate it 90 degrees to deal with vertical video or horizontal video that came in vertically or anything like that. I can change how it loops. I can change the delay, change the transition. These effects I can select. Oh, right there. Sorry, hadn't done that in a while. So I can change that, and I can add multiples. So I can really make it all kinds of funky if I wanted to. I just pick those at random. So I'm going to clear all those. So that's how I can set in and out points. Reset out. Okay. And go from there. Okay. Notes. Can you auto start timers? How do you want to auto start the timer? Do you want it to start on a click, or do you want it to start with a calendar? Because you can do either. If you right click on a slide, What used to be called cues is now called actions. So I can add an action. And there is a timer action. And I can choose a, let's say, timer here. And I can have it start, stop, reset, whatever on that slide. If I wanted to have that start with the calendar action, I might create a blank slide, put that on there, and then have the calendar start with that blank slide. So those are the two ways. And you could, so what I would do, Ed, is I would create the timer to start the countdown at 10:43, put it on a blank slide before the pre-service loop, and have the calendar select that blank slide at 10:43. Is there still a clocks function? It's basically timers. I think they just renamed it. I mean, see, it looks exactly the same. So, unlike Pro 5, you're not limited to 3 of them. You can have as many as you want. So, and you can, if you wanted to, you could put a timer on the slides layer now. But in general, you want that on a different layer. Okay, going back to this. When you activate MIDI module on Windows, does it transmit over the Ethernet or just in that PC? It can do in the same computer, over Ethernet, or using a USB to MIDI dongle, which I've got one around here somewhere I was going to show you, but I probably won't find it very quickly. So that should work on Windows. I think there might be some third-party software that you get, but I think it's like open source stuff. So I'll have to look into that. We use the master slave feature in Pro 6. Is that feature still available in Pro 7? Not yet. It's coming. It might not look identical, but it's coming. In the beta group, we said to the Renewed Vision folk, where's the master slave? You know, we get all these modules, where is it? And they go, well, you don't need it because you can have multiple outputs. And then people were talking about situations where you did kind of need it. And they said, oh, well, we'll have to add that back in. So the plan is, this is official, it's actually on the website, that they're going to add something like that back in. So you could send NDI from one ProPresenter machine to another if you wanted to. You could send MIDI commands from one ProPresenter machine to another right now to get past it. But right now it's not there yet. So maybe you want to wait. I don't know. Denise, can you create a presentation at another computer and then open it up at the church computer for service? Absolutely. So I'm not at church right now, I'm at home. So if I wanted to get this, what I would do is file, export as, I like the presentation bundle. So I'd click that, save that out, and then I could take it on a thumb drive to church if I wanted to. Sneaker net it, as they used to say. Or I could use something like Dropbox or another Google Drive, one of those services, to sync between those computers and then do it like that. You should know that you do not need the registered version to make presentations. And the only difference between the registered version and the free, just download it, play with it version is the watermark that in Pro 7 shows up for a few seconds, then goes away, then shows up for a few seconds, then goes away. And I think they did that just because it's a little more annoying. If there were churches that were like trying to be all clever to not uh, pay for it, which quite frankly, not honest. So that's a way to get past that. Next, when I installed 7 and migrated my 6 contents, none of my categories migrated, so all my items appear as one. Is there a way to select multiple items to identify them as a song or other category? So one of the things that they changed in Pro 7 is they got rid of categories, but before you're too worried, I want you to look over here at my library and notice that I have default, hymns, and test library. I could just as easily have a new library that I call sermons or worship music or Christmas music, etc. So the libraries can function basically like the categories. And I really like this because you can pull from any library at any time. So I can get something from my default library, then I can get a hymn from my hymns library, and then I can get something from my test library. And so that works really well. If you have, let's say the youth ministry uses the same computer, they could have their own library. And when you have Youth Sunday, you can pull from their library. So uh, that's a pretty cool feature. And you can copy uh, from one library to another. So I could grab this one and put that in my sermons library that I just did, which I wouldn't generally want to copy a hymn to the sermons library, but I could. And that's how you can really do some organization there. If my church was to purchase the subscription training videos, does it cover the basic as well as advanced settings? I would only show my volunteers the basic. Thanks. Yes, it does. So here's what I've done. With ProPresenter, I recognize that different people use it different ways. So I don't have it fleshed out completely for Pro 7, but once I have the creation course done, my next one is the operators course. And that is, hey, this is when to change a slide. This is what happens when you accidentally hit something, how to fix it real quick, etc. So that's exactly what I have in mind. And I'll make one for pastors and teachers so that they can get off the PowerPoint because I'm thinking about you. So those are probably the first 3 courses that I will have made. The creation one is in process, should be done very soon. And then the operators one is the next one, and then probably pastors and teachers after that. You're welcome, Luke. So Ed, when does the trial start? At download or install? I think the answer is neither. I think the answer is when you put the code in that they tell you about. So you can download ProPresenter and play with it to your heart's content without any code. But when you say, hey, I want to do the 14-day trial, the moment you paste the trial into ProPresenter, that's when the clock starts ticking. I'm nearly 100% sure. So keep in mind, I don't actually work for Renewed Vision. I'm just their biggest fan. So how does integration with Planning Center Online work now? Basically the same, because Planning Center doesn't have a published API that they could create new stuff for. So I think it's basically the same that it was. So you can add a thing. It's here. Planning Center service. Just click that and log in and bring that in. The search function has improved tremendously. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Becky. Earlier today, someone said, I don't like the new search function. I think it's to each his own. So if I do Command F, that will bring up the search. And you'll notice that it only searches either the library right here, and it searches all the libraries, by the way. So default library, sermon library, hymns library, it searches all those, or Planning Center. But once I type in, let's say I'm doing a search for Amazing Grace, once I type that in, if I click on Planning Center, I'm not logged into Planning Center. That's not the piece of the puzzle I do at my church. But if I did click to log into Planning Center and I logged in, then it would search Planning Center. Not every single time you do a search. So that should speed up things with Song Select on Sundays and Wednesdays as well, because with Pro 6, every single search also search for Planning Center, not Planning Center, Song Select. So let's see here. Can I import Media Shout songs? Not directly. You can export them as text files, I believe, in Media Shout, but I'll have to look. I know that there are people that have created third-party products to import either Easy Worship or Media Shout, or maybe both. So there is a way to do it. Has the Telestrator functionality improved any? Right now, it's not in Pro 7. So I would say no, since it's not in there yet. But that's on the list of features that they say is going to be there in some form or fashion coming. So will Pro 7 ever be able to integrate with more than just Planning Center, like CCB, for example? If there's a way for, I would say these two things. First off, if there's a way for them to integrate, because sometimes APIs are either exist or don't exist or whatever. I don't know all that much about CCB. Two, if there's enough demand for it. Keep in mind the people at Renewed Vision have a heart for churches and helping out with stuff like this. Part of why they've changed their business model a little bit is it was getting on their last nerves that they'd create something and not be able to get it out to you. And they're like, I don't want to wait 3 years for the new version of ProPresenter. This is great. Everyone's going to love it. And the editor was an example like that, from what I'm told, that the editor was ready like 3 years ago and they wanted to get it out, but they didn't have enough new features to make a ginormous, hey, this is the coolest thing ever release like they did with Pro 7. So they had to stay on it, and they were unhappy about that fact. So very well might be. Any other questions? We've been going a little over an hour, but I still have water, so I'm happy to answer more questions. Oh, my hair is messed up. No one said anything. It's okay. Probably no one noticed but me. I'm quite frankly happy I still have hair, because it was touch and go for a while. Is 7 fully usable? Yes, if your computer isn't downloading software while you're doing a webinar like mine was. The conference I went to last weekend, I used it straight on through, no problems, except I was tweaking the stage monitor preview and had a couple of problems there. That was with the previous version. I haven't tried it since I upgraded, so I don't know if they've fixed that. But that would be something that you would do before church starts, not during the middle of things. So yeah, I think it's perfectly usable right now, but as with everything, your mileage might vary. What I would do if I were you is I'd download the free version. Don't even worry about getting the trial yet, and remake some of your recent services in it. Test them out, like do a dry run and see how it works for you, and then go from there. I think they have a roadmap. I don't think that they have published it yet. I think they want to get a few of these more frequent releases under their belts before they start saying, oh yeah, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Because Pro 7, for example, they'd meant to release it a little earlier than they did. And, just you find another bug and they're like, I thought we got all these, stuff like that. So I think that we're going to find that they're going to get kind of a rhythm down, and they'll have more success as they do that. And maybe there will be a roadmap published that way. I do know that they have a list of features that are missing, like Telestrator, like the record the output, that's missing. There are a few little things, not stuff that was used as much, and they have said for each of those if they're coming or not. So the master slave module functionality is coming. The Telestrator functionality they said is coming. So if is coming means 2 weeks or 2 years, I don't know, but that's what they've said. And they're from people that I've heard that know more than me, they seem to think that the next time they release something, which should be before all the ProPresenter Plus stuff requires to be re-upped, that people are going to go, oh, look at all these new features that I needed, that I didn't know I needed. So I think that's their goal. Do you know how much it would cost to upgrade from Pro 4 to Pro 7? I don't believe that there is a discount because that is so old. Sorry to say, but it's over a decade old, I think. I know ProPresenter 6 came out 5 years ago. So 5 was before that by a couple of years. So almost a decade. I don't think there's a discount. But if you go into renewedvision.com, there's a place where you can put in your activation code and they'll tell you if there is a discount. You should probably do it anyway because that will kind of keep them in the system. One doesn't overwrite the other. I don't think you could actually run ProPresenter 4 on the same system that will run ProPresenter 7. So you don't have to worry about that. 6 and 7 can run on the same system. In fact, you'll notice down here, I have ProPresenter 6 right by ProPresenter 7. And so I go back and forth based on what I need to do. Like if this was a ProPresenter 6 webinar, I show ProPresenter 6. So that's not a big deal. Does the free version send the watermark out on all outputs or just the main output? I think it sends it to all the audience outputs. So the NDI, SDI, a directly connected, like an HDMI, VGA display, any of those, Siphon, I think it would send that out on. The stage display, it may. it's been a while since I've had a version that had that. So that's something that I can check later on. Do you need, okay, so what kind of system requirements are needed to run Pro 7 on Windows 10 computer? The only system requirement that they put on the website is, I think it's Windows 10 1907. It's one of the more recent versions of Windows 10. So if your computer can run it, it can run ProPresenter. But if I was starting from scratch, I would want at least 16 gigs of RAM. I would want an SSD. I would want the best processor I could get, just because you don't buy hardware for today, you buy it for the future. You know, you're not buying a computer and going, well, I hope it lasts a week. No, you buy a computer because you want it to last years. So those are the things that I would look for. Video cards that can handle some pretty cool stuff. You know, those are the things that I would look for. Um, and that's good. We're getting a couple of thank yous. I'm happy to share with you. This is the kind of stuff that I love doing. So I loved doing this, and I love doing it for my members, for the live courses or the pre-recorded ones. You know, it's just fun to train you. So I'm glad that you've let me help you out with all this. Um, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask about them, and I'll be in touch. If, let's see here. Oh, if you're not a member of the ProPresenter users group, by all means, search on Facebook for ProPresenter users group, and you should be able to join there. Um, what else do I want to say? I'd love to have you with Church Tech U, so that you can be one of the dozens of churches that I help, because you know, we've got a new version. I've had it for a while. The live classes are included with that. They're not a special fee or anything like that. I know that there is another company who shall remain nameless that is right now doing a ProPresenter 6 live class that was $450 per person. I'm remarkably cheaper than that. So, and that's included Pro 6 and Pro 7. I'm going through them both right now. So if you find that interesting, that link. So, well, you're welcome. I'm glad you thought it was a great seminar. I'm glad you thought it was a great webinar. If you have multiple outputs on iMac, is there a need for a need GPU? If you have enough outputs on your Mac, then you don't need to get any special hardware. So let's say you had a stage screen and a main output, and you've got two firewires on your, not firewire, that's old school, two Thunderbolts on your Mac, and so you have Thunderbolt to US to HDMI adapters, and you only needed two in addition to the built-in one on an iMac. No reason to buy any extra hardware. That would work perfectly fine. Now, if the pastor says, hey, I heard I could send like 4 distinct signals, then you would need something. So just get what you need. And it's nice that now they're able to support some of these other configurations in different resolutions, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that. That's new as well. Let's see here. If you have, okay, I already, can you send an output over a URL? So like live streaming, probably what I would do is I would download OBS, Open Broadcaster Software, which is a live stream encoder, and I would, if it was on the same computer, I would use Siphon if it was a Mac. If not, I would use NDI. There's a free plugin you can get, and that could send it to Facebook or YouTube or I don't know, churchstreaming.tv or Boxcast, any of those live streaming hosts. I do write an article monthly for Church Production Magazine on live streaming, so I'm happy to answer that. So Nathan, if you have three, a main out, a stage display, and lobby TVs, and you have three outputs, you could do for the stage display, you could do a USB. I think current iMacs, not the iMac Pro, the iMac Pro has four, but I think current iMacs by default can do two outputs. So you could do a USB video adapter. Here, let me give you a short code for the one that I'm using. And that is an affiliate link, but it doesn't cost you extra. USB video. And I'm actually looking at the output of one right now. So it works with Catalina, which I've got the latest version of Catalina. So you do have to do a little tweaking with the drivers, but that one has worked for me for years. Will you prepare any tutorial on ProPresenter 7 automation through MIDI, like for example with Ableton? I will do some with MIDI. I might bring in Ableton, but I think the process is very similar. You know, basically Ableton sends a MIDI note, and here, so bam, go to here, preferences. If we go to devices, MIDI map, right here, that shows you the MIDI notes and what they do. So that's the default stuff. You can actually do some changes here, but that is, you basically have Ableton send that stuff based on what you needed. And there is some back-end setup stuff. I've got the Pro 6 version out already. So what if your computer only supports 2 video outputs, not including the desktop screen? Can you send out more outputs for like a lobby screen? Well, like I said earlier, Luke, the cheapest way is probably to use a USB video adapter, and I'd probably choose that for the stage display. Just because it's not as powerful as the built-in video card displays, but quite frankly, most of the time I can't tell the difference in Catalina and also Mojave. High Sierra was problematic, but Sierra was good too. It got better with Mojave, and like I was really pleased once I upgraded to that. So that's the cheapest way to do it. You could use a Sonnet enclosure and the 4 output Blackmagic cards that they showed in the keynote, but that's like around a $300 to $500 solution, whereas the USB adapter is like a $30 solution. So I'd try the $30 solution from Amazon first, and if it doesn't work, I'd send it back because that would work, and then go for the more expensive solutions. So, okay, well, our numbers have dwindled a bit. We've still got a few people, but if there are no other questions, then I'm happy to let you leave. Hope you have a good night, and like I say in all my tutorials, go out and change eternity.